Hey, everybody, back for podcast number 3. Today we have a super special guest from our Fort Worth ISD Administration Office, our Chief of Schools, Mr. Jerry Moore. Jerry, welcome.
Hey, thanks, John. Good to be here. Good to talk to Southwest High School teachers.
For those of you who don't know, Jerry is a famous alumnus of Southwest High School. And some of you should know his sister, Mrs. Moore, is our intervention specialist. So, Jerry, we've known each other for a long time. Before we kind of get into all this, why Fort Worth ISD? You've been a teacher, a principal, academic officer, now chief of schools. Why Fort Worth?
When I walked in the building today, I stopped and looked at the wall of distinguished alumnus. And one, I want you to change my picture on that wall for sure, but
Definitely.
We'll talk more about that.
You pick the picture, we'll make it happen.
All right. But guys, I think it's just my experience that I've had growing up here in Fort Worth. I tell people all the time I had a great school experience, elementary, middle, high school, all in the Southwest High School pyramid. And when I came back and started teaching, my goal was to be able to give kids the same experience that I had. And as I spent more time in more schools, I realized all kids weren't having the type of experience that I got to engage in through school. And so it's just kind of been a driver for me to stay connected with Fort Worth, to look at what's happening in our schools, for our kids, for our community, and just do what I can to make sure every day we're getting a little bit better for the kids here in Fort Worth.
I love it. And, people I don't think know how much you've done just for this community in the sense of, being the principal at Woodway,
yeah.
And then just, your relationship with all the principals. And so I just want to say thank you before we kind of kick off to some of these questions. And I think it's important for people to know the leaders of our district are really invested in our communities. And I appreciate all that you do in regards to that. So thank you, man.
Well, you're kind. Thank you for that.
So, we've been doing some work here as a campus and around our district about engagement, right? Yeah. Like everyone, that's like the big buzzword, engagement. Oh, yeah. And so for a lot of teachers, we say that word, but then we really want to talk about what it means a little bit deeper and have a clearer understanding. So when we talk about engagement and you hear that word, what does it look like in the classroom? Like when you say that's a highly engaged classroom, what are the kids doing? What's the teacher doing that makes it highly effective?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Like you said, it's a buzzword. Engagement is easy to talk about, but it's not easy if we don't all have the same definition. When I think about engagement, I walk into a classroom and I look at just student behavior. What are students doing in the classroom? Are students active? The first thing that I look for is how are students demonstrating their knowledge, what's happening? I don't always want to see the teacher being the one that's doing all the talking in the classroom. I want to see the students demonstrating their thinking. I love whiteboards everywhere around the room because it gives kids an opportunity to get up and show what are you struggling with? What's the problem that the teacher has posed to you, and show me how you're thinking through the problem. Or talk to me about this experiment or this situation that you're studying in the classroom, and demonstrate your thought process so that other kids can see, hey, I wasn't thinking about it that way. I see what you're doing. And now let me add on to that. Engagement to me just is kids being the leader in the classroom, and the teacher facilitating that. I think the teacher has information to impart to kids, but then the teacher also has the responsibility to create the environment for the kids to take that information and to really process it and understand what that means to them in the context of the lesson.
Two things I heard there that, I think are really aligned with some of the work we've been doing is a student-led classroom, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is like learning is not mistake-free.
Oh.
Like this idea of I think especially when I was a first year teacher, just, man, my principal's in the room or somebody's in the room, and if the kids don't get the right answer, I'm going to somehow be marked down. Like, we expect kids to struggle. We want the struggle to be part of the process. We just want it to be in an environment that's safe, friendly, and welcoming. So, I mean, I appreciate that. I love that we're talking about student-led classrooms versus what the teacher's actions are.
John, you remember when we started teaching here?
I do.
Guys, y'all may not know it, but Mr. Engel and I, we met each other at new teacher orientation here in Fort Worth ISD.
We sure did.
Yeah. And I think when what you're talking about the student being the learner, I mean, I think back to 1997.
Yeah.
I think that's what we were talking about then, as we were talking about being new teachers going into our classrooms. What is our role as the facilitator, not the person that's doing all of the work in the classroom, but creating an environment where students can be the ones that are doing the work, and we're making sure we're guiding that work in the right direction.
Yeah, I think high quality Tier 1 instruction has been influenced by technology and has been influenced with, some of our opportunities and tools and resources, but really the essence of student-led classrooms has remained pretty intact. But yeah, I don't want to go back to 1997 and relive my first year. Well, maybe I'll kick some questions about that down the road, but it definitely was an experience and a commitment to learning that craft, and it's going to take some time for people to do that.
Yeah.
Keeping with this idea of engagement, right? Sometimes teachers get confused with, well, my classroom, the kids are really good. They're very compliant. That no one is being disruptive. Talk to me about what you think the difference between a compliant classroom is and then, kind of authentically engaged environment.
Yeah. As John, you used a word that that really irritates me. And I think it's interesting because we've had this conversation at principal meetings.
I'm glad it was just one word. Let me be clear on that.
It was one word. We've had this conversation quite a bit during principal meetings this whole year as we've been working together. I hate compliance. I feel like in my mind, compliance talks about a check sheet, and it's you have this, and this to do. And it's just okay, I did this, I did that, I'm good. And you're not looking at what the result of those items that you had in front of you for the day. So your lesson, your objectives, the learning that you want kids to engage in. As a teacher, I can get through my lesson plan, but am I stopping to look at what did kids get out of the lesson that I taught them today? And to me, that's the difference between a compliant classroom and an authentically engaging classroom. Is the teacher looks at where the kids are and is ready to adjust and is ready to go where the kids are saying in the process of their learning, this is what I need. It's real easy to say, I've got a lesson plan, I know what I'm doing for this 90-minute lesson, and I'm going to get from A to B, and I did my job. And I know we've got the majority of our teachers are not that type of teacher. So what we're saying is we do want authentic engagement because I'm going to look at my kids and I'm going to say, I may have this plan, but depending on what my kids are getting or what they're not getting or where they want to go with the conversation, I'm ready to pivot, and we're going to keep them involved in what we're doing.
I mean, I just think it goes back to we're not measured on what we teach. We're measured on what the kids learn.
You got
right?
it. You got it.
And so that just, if people can just make that shift and understand that, like, look, it's important to be a strong teacher and have a good direct teach and all those parts of it. But at the end of the day, you're measured on what the kids are able to do, not how much curriculum you covered or, how great your direct teach portion was.
I used to, and as a principal, I used to tell my teachers, when I walk into your classroom, I'm not necessarily looking at what your objective for the day was, or are you on the curriculum, or are you exactly where you need to be? What I'm looking for is what are kids learning when I walk into your classroom. If I walk into a classroom and you as the teacher are the one that's doing all the work, man, you're working too hard. Put the kids to work and let me see what they're actually learning. And that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I'm going to give you feedback on, is whether kids were successful with what you were wanting them to learn or not. Not necessarily did you get through your lesson, did you follow the curriculum, did you have the depth and complexity of this TEAC. It's just about what you did in your Tier 1 instruction, and make sure kids learn something every day.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things I've learned and learning under you is classroom management works itself out when their kids are a student-led classroom. Like, so I think a lot of people are like, compliance is one of those things where if I give them the opportunity to lead, they might be loud, they might lead in a direction I didn't plan for, and you know, that's part of the learning process. But ultimately, management kind of works itself out.
For sure.
One of the things I really want to give you credit for, and just the work you've done in Fort Worth, is around the lesson cycle. And you know, we've started this work. Man, it's been a minute, and it's evolved, and you've evolved it and trained it. But in looking at the Fort Worth ISD lesson cycle and teacher performance, what would you tell teachers to really focus on improving or learning to address student performance?
John, I was trying to think about when we started the conversation around, and I think the first time we called it was like the effective instruction framework.
Right. Essential elements.
Yeah.
I remember we've had several names for this kind of work.
Yeah. And really it's all the same thing, right? It's just good, solid teaching. I think our latest instructional framework, I'm actually really proud of it. And I think the thing that gets overlooked is that there's two distinct components of the instructional framework. One, the first component is about the environment that you set up as a teacher.
Right.
It's about how do you create a classroom environment where kids feel free to take risks, where kids know that I can lead where my learning is going, that kids know that they're valued and respected and a part of the classroom, that it's not all, I'm the teacher, I'm deciding what's going to happen in this classroom, and you've got to follow along wherever I say you're going to follow. Teacher and students are in the classroom together making decisions about what's going to be the greatest benefit for learning each day and throughout the course of the classwork. So I would encourage teachers to go back and look at the instructional framework and look at that first piece that talks about how do you establish your classroom environment. The piece that we've been working on for years now has to do with that kind of gradual release model that we've identified, the actual instructional framework in my mind. And kind of my philosophy all along has been, modeling is the key to success in any instruction, in any classroom, in any learning that you want kids to engage in. And so when you think about what's the best way for the teacher to impart knowledge, to model what that knowledge needs to look like and how you process what you're trying to teach a student, and then giving students the opportunity to practice what you're teaching them, gradual release is the best way to do it. The I do, we do, you do. And if I could say one thing, it would be when I walk into your classroom, let me see those components in place. Let me see that you have a plan for, I've got information I want to share with you, student. And then after I share that information, I'm going to model that for you so you can see, what are we talking about? I'm going to give you an experience where you can process, what did you just teach me? How can I manipulate, work, understand, demonstrate my understanding of what you taught me? And then after I'm guiding you through that, students, I'm going to give you a chance to work on your own. And work on your own doesn't always mean you sit at a desk and you work problems or you answer questions or you're silent and you're by yourself. A chance for students to do the work together, the I do piece, I do, we do, you do, the you do piece,
right,
can be kids together. But it's where you step back and you're watching students actually put your teaching into place. And my philosophy is if we did gradual release every day in every classroom, kids would walk away and would be able to say, I learned this today. And when you stack day after day after day throughout the course of a year, you're going to think, I learned these specific lessons, skills, objectives, but look at where we are at the end of the year and how much kids learned if you're just teaching kids a specific something every day they're in your classroom.
I mean, I think that's so critical. Just kids' favorite teachers are the teachers they learn the most from.
For sure.
And so, I've been able to walk schools that you've led and seen teachers that you've grown with that model. And it takes time and energy and practice. But I think back to your point earlier, it's just, you model it, but you allow the kids to do some of the heavy lifting, you know, and some of that struggle, because that's what learning is. Like, learning isn't, every task the first time you do it. I mean, if that was the case, we would all be out of a job. But that's great advice. I appreciate you giving that. As we come to kind of the spring semester, and it's been a heavy year, right, with the pandemic and everything that we've had going on, and just reacclimation to school. What advice do you have for teachers to kind of finish out the year?
Recognize that it's been a tough year, and understand that we all know it's been a tough year. And while we want you all to take care of yourselves, and we want to take care of you, we still have work that we have to do. And if there's one way that we stay focused on the work, it's take care of your kids. Make sure that the students that are in your classroom stay number one. And my advice for you, the way that you do that, is not worry about what state assessment is out there that we have to prepare for, or what are all these other expectations. It goes back to, what does your daily instruction look like? Stay focused on, I'm going to go in with a plan to make sure kids learn something new today. I'm going to implement my instructional framework. I'm going to implement a gradual release model in my teaching. And I'm going to give kids an opportunity to learn something, and just stay focused on high-quality Tier 1 instruction, daily instruction that's going to move kids forward. If you do that every day, there's nobody can argue about what you're doing in your classroom. Like, anybody walks in your classroom and I'm working with kids, I'm giving kids a chance to be successful, I'm teaching them something new every day, I don't see how anybody argues about what happens in your classroom.
Well, and I think, credit to your leadership and to what you've developed at our district level in the sense of, right, state scores matter. Like we get that, and you get that. But at the end of the day, those things work themselves out if you have high-quality Tier 1 instruction.
And that's been my philosophy all along, and that's what we talk about with principals all the time. Let's shift away from this idea of we've got to get ready for these state tests, because if you're teaching kids every day, the state tests are going to take care of themselves. You don't have to worry about preparing for it. Do you need to make sure kids know what's expected of them? Sure you do. But just teach. Just go in and teach. Make it a good experience. Make kids a part of what's happening in your classroom. Make them excited about what you're trying to teach them, excited about being in your classroom and learning. And they're going to get it, and the tests are going to take care of itself.
And we've talked about, that another buzzword is growth mindset, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I think that speaks, what we're talking about now, really speaks to growth mindset, of a sense of, you're not in control, I'm not in control. No one's in control of the baseline of where kids enter your classroom. Yeah. But I think your expectation and my expectation is wherever they enter in August, in May, there should be growth.
That's it.
And a lot of times that growth is going to get us to where we need to be on performance tasks that we're measured by, but sometimes it won't. But the state and everyone understands that, high quality classroom instruction day to day is going to have the greatest impact on student performance. And I think sometimes teachers get into this idea of, man, the kids came in really low, or they're not able to do this. That's not what we're talking about anymore. It's moving away, because that's a deficit mindset, moving away from, hey, my kids are 3 years below. Well, they may be 3 years off grade level, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, where did you get them and where did they go by May?
So one of the things I think about there's two different things that we're talking about here. Are we talking about student achievement, or are we talking about student growth? And the thing
That's powerful.
The thing that I want everybody to realize is you can't just say we're going to improve student achievement and snap your fingers and have it happen. There is a pathway to get students to achieve at levels that we need them to achieve. It's by growing kids.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that it has to happen in a day, a week, or a year. If you've got a student that's 3 years below where they should be, why are we expecting them to be on grade level at the end of the year when they spend the year with you? What we expect is that you've grown them, that wherever they came in at the beginning of the year, you've invested in them, you've taught them, you've developed them, they've learned more from you, and they've advanced. If that means it takes us 2, 3, 4 years to get them where they need to be, if we're growing kids every year, we're going to get them there at some point. I know we're talking to a group of high school teachers that are saying, but this is where it ends. We've got to get them to graduate. Yeah, you do. But your focus has to be growth, not achievement. And if that's where you stay focused and you're giving opportunities for kids, it'll take care of itself.
And I think that it's, we read that book, Good to Great by Jim Collins back in the day, and they talk about the importance of moving the flywheel forward and how much energy you have to expend in getting them on the pathway to recovery. Well, for some of our students who are struggling, you may be the teacher who's putting in a lot of energy to start them back on the growth, that growth forward mindset, and the shift from I can't do this and having it, because kids have a fixed mindset. I can't do school, especially in high school. You get to 9th grade, if you're off, I'm a struggling student. School's not for me. So a lot of work has to be done, from middle school to high school about shifting that fixed mindset kids have, getting that flywheel started, and then, allowing teachers to run with that growth. Because once you get it started,
it just compounds and it just keeps moving. I mean, that's that flywheel effect. It is a difficult thing to get it started, but once it gets started, kids will take off with it. And we've seen great things happen for kids around here.
I mean, one of the things you've told me, but I've heard you say you're such a culture guy, and you build such positivity in our meetings. But just I know you as a leader. Just watching students enjoy learning.
You got it.
And you would always say, the kids, if they're coming to school, they're not coming to school not to learn.
That's right.
They're coming here because they want to learn. And sometimes I think their behavior or other things kind of mask maybe what they're really trying to do. Like, I don't think there's any kid in our school here today that doesn't really want to learn. I think there's some kids that are really scared of putting themselves back out there, and scared of allowing their peers to see, and that's a craft that teachers have to work through.
Yeah. And to me, that speaks to what's most important, and it's the school experience. And the school experience is everything. It's the environment you create in your school. It's the experience you're creating in the classroom. It's the learning that students are participating in. It's all the extra activities that students can connect to. And yeah, you're right. Kids don't show up to school because they don't want to learn. They're coming to improve. And so we got to do our part. And
I just think a lot of times their behaviors or their things are avoidance more than anything, right? It's just, I want to learn, but I don't really want to risk someone knowing that I don't know. And so, again, back to that, setting your classroom up and then having high quality instruction. We've talked a lot about school culture, building a positive, understanding that, there's an attack on public education, and teachers feel that weight, students feel that weight. So when teachers look at morale, their own morale moving forward and stuff, what can they do to help control their morale? How do they build that positive frame?
I think the one thing I would say is have a good handle of the things that are within your control and the things that aren't. And there are certain things that you can You can be the deciding factor in. You can decide what's going to happen in your classroom. You can decide what you're going to teach your kids today. You can decide the way you're going to react to student behavior in your classroom. You can decide how prepared you are for what you're going to do each day. And you just got to react to how everything else happens and not stress over it. You know, I wonder a lot of times if teachers are really worried about what's my principal going to think if he walks into my classroom, or what's going to happen if I'm not doing this or that. And the thing that I would say to teachers is, if you're walking in and you've got a solid plan and you know that you've created, this is what I'm going to do for kids, and I'm going to choose to have a positive attitude, and I'm going to make the best out of whatever happens, I'll take that teacher every day. You know what? It may not be ideal. Kids may take your classroom, your lesson, what's happening that day in a different direction. If you take it as it goes and try to make it the best, most positive experience for kids, and keep moving forward with your instruction, I'll take it.
I read the book Fish. It's about the Seattle Pike's Fish Market, you know, and they talk about choose your attitude, you know, and I think that's so true, right? Like, I mean, we're not going to, I'm sure you face things every single day, probably every single hour, that you did not expect. Like there was no way to plan for what's going to happen in a district of 80,000 kids.
You got it.
But how you choose your work is important. And the other thing I bring up with teachers is morale is a function, and I love how you kind of talked about choice. Morale is a function of where you choose to look for morale, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was a teacher, Dr. Brooks told me one thing, and I've stuck with this, and that's my principle for those of you who don't know. She said, if you're waiting for me to tell you good job every day, that's an unrealistic expectation. You know, morale and how you feel good should come from what your kids are learning.
Oh, yeah.
Your classroom is going to build you and validate those feelings of excellence that you need. So I just would encourage students or teachers to, no matter what people are saying, at the end of the day, you're like you said, you're in control of what's happening in your room.
When you step in your classroom with your 30, 35 kids that are in that classroom with you, you get to decide. You get to decide how you're going to react to what happens, what you're going to do with those kids, what your attitude's going to be about what happens in the classroom. And that, to me, that's every time something happens around the district and I get, I need to tell you about this, my general response is, it's going to be all right. Yeah. Because everything's going to be all right. We'll figure it out. And I guess that's what I would want teachers to know is just you do your thing. You come prepared. You take care of kids, and everything else is going to be all right. We'll figure it out.
One of the things that, you know, we talked a little bit about us starting our teaching career together, and you talked about being prepared. And I think that one of the things that we were really encouraged to do and trained to do, and I don't know that it happens as much in teaching programs or alternative programs, is how much time you spend in lesson planning.
Yeah.
Like our first couple years, we spent a ton of time lesson planning.
Yeah.
And it didn't mean all the lessons went well. Did they all go? Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes the ones that I thought were going to go really well went terrible, and the, vice versa. The ones I was like, man, I don't know if I have a good feel for this, went really well. But it gets into this idea, Jerry, of I think teacher burnout relates to this first year, every year kind of concept where, every year I'm redoing my lesson plans. I think, and we've talked a little bit about this, is the more you plan those first couple of years, the less likely you are to burn out because you're able to grow as a teacher.
Yeah.
If you're not planning as a principal, or it's pretty easy to tell teachers who've planned versus teachers who haven't when you walk into a classroom.
And the other part to that is your kids can tell it too.
Like within the first 30 seconds.
Without a doubt. And that was one of the first questions I always asked my teachers as a principal. Was that a good lesson? And they would always want to know why you're asking. I said, no, I'm just asking you the question. You just delivered that lesson. Thinking about what happened, would you say that was a good lesson? No judgment. I just want to know. Because you know, but the thing is, the kids know too. The kids know if you were prepared. The kids know if you have a good lesson for them. The kids know if they're learning something. And that's the key to that's the key to being, an effective teacher is planning, coming in with prepared.
Well, and the district's invested quite a bit of money in providing multiple planning periods.
Yeah.
PLC opportunities. So the expectation is to. I was a teacher. You were a teacher.
Yeah.
If you utilize the minutes that are within the day to really focus on the priority of planning and meeting as a team to discuss your lessons, it's going to make your week so much easier. But if you use those 90 minutes to visit or, not that visiting is important, but being structured around planning, I think is really critical.
One of the things that I always thought about was there's a reason why you have that time carved out. And, no judgment. If you want to spend your 90 minutes to visit, do it. But that means you got to find 90 minutes somewhere else to prepare for what's coming next. I mean, the planning and the preparation time doesn't go away. You got to figure out what works for you. But you can't just discount that I can come in and figure out my classroom on the fly, because it doesn't work that way. And your kids are going to be the first one that know it. And then you're going to have some stress in your life that you didn't have to have.
Yeah. Again, it's you're in control of that.
Yeah.
We're in control of that in regards to our leadership styles with our schools. And, just kind of, I'll wrap up with just two last kind of push outs,
Sure.
When teachers are planning and moving forward with the lesson cycle,
Yeah.
You talked about I do, you do, or I do, we do, you do.
Yeah.
Right. The focus that I want to make sure that teachers understand is how clear they need to be with where kids need to get with their learning,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the closure of the lesson
Yeah.
is important so that kids feel that positive success. So, what are some ways that teachers can close lessons that you think are effective for giving them the feedback they need to know if the kids got the lesson or not?
Yeah. I think a lot of that is driven by the teacher. For me, the idea of an exit ticket is fine, but it's not about you have a problem or a demonstration of learning that kids need to have before they walk out the door. It's what you do with it. What I always like to do is just end my lessons with a conversation with kids. To go back and revisit what I knew my objective for the day was. What did I want kids to get? And just talk to them. Like, just hear from them of, hey, if this is what I was wanting to get, how many of you can tell me, how to do this algebra problem, or what the history situation was that I was talking about today, or whatever your content is. Carve out some time to talk to your kids and just say, if I walked into my lesson with an objective, I modeled it, and I'm going to say it again because modeling is the key to success in instruction. If I modeled it well, demonstrated the learning, gave kids a chance to practice their learning, I'm coming back to say, what'd you get out of my lesson? And if it matches what my objective, what I wanted kids to learn today, then I walk away saying that was a successful day.
Well, I kind of threw you a curveball there because you answered it as I knew you would perfectly. What I want people to understand is not everything has to be like for a formal grade.
No.
Like what you said is perfect. Like have an understanding of did the kids where did we get in our growth towards that objective?
Yeah.
We may get to a ending point, or we may get to a point where, gosh, they're not where I need to be. And moving on when kids aren't ready to move on is counterproductive to the growth mindset that we need to do. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we want to have rigor in our classrooms, but we have to support rigor. I tell people all the time, the more you increase rigor, the more supports you have to surround your teachers, your students, and all those things. And so last kind of thing is, as we kind of come to the end of the school year and we talked about, one piece of advice for teachers in their classroom, what can teachers do? Because I know you're such a proponent of school and community parent relationships. Yep. What can teachers do to continue to build relationships with parents, to change the narrative of our schools? That's the thing I know it bothers you and it drives me insane is when people say something negative about our schools, because I know how hard teachers are working. I know the quality of our kids. I know the programs we have. I want to change that narrative. I know you want to change that narrative. So what can teachers do to help work with parents to change that narrative so that they have a really good understanding of what's happening in our schools?
I think for me, the best thing that I would say is don't be afraid of transparency. Don't be afraid to let parents know what you're doing. Let parents know what's happening in the classroom. Invite parents into the school. I feel like a lot of times we take this stance that, hey, my classroom, close the door, let me do what I need to do. I just say, let people come in and see what you're doing. If you got a good plan, if you're teaching every day, if you're growing kids, we ought to let people know. And the more comfortable parents feel about what's happening in the school, in the classroom, with the programs that kids are involved in, the more supportive we're going to get from parents. It's hard to argue about something that you think happened when you know what's really happening. And so the more that you can do that, the better situation we're going to be in.
And one thing I learned from you too is parent conferences don't always have to be, they should be a positive thing.
Yeah.
And so that it doesn't always have to be, I'm calling because Johnny's in trouble. We need to focus on, and one thing that I know both of us did as principals was we focus more on how many positive interactions you're making with parents than the required parent conferences.
And what I would say is the informal parent contact, conversation, conference, whatever you want to call it, goes 100 times further than a formal, I need to have a sit-down conference with the parent. If you can just stay in communication with parents and they feel like, hey, I know my teacher, I know what's going on, I know what they're doing, and you're not going to have problems with parents.
People work harder for people they like.
They sure do.
I'm really blessed to have you as a colleague and a friend. Yeah. And, man, I'm honored to just have you as our leader of our district, man. You're doing amazing things along with the rest of the chiefs down there. But your direct impact on school leadership and what you're bringing, I hope people are excited about it. I'm excited about it. Yeah. I know that it's going to take some time to recalibrate and to refocus from where we were. But, man, thank you so much for going above and beyond and leading our district in a way that puts students first, man. I'm eternally grateful for you spending a little time with me today. And I hope people learned a lot because I always do every time we're together. Well, thank you.
I appreciate you giving me a chance. Good to talk to your teachers. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.